Infinity Redux by midnightwolf2192. Chapter 12. Peppa! Tony cried out excitedly as he burst into his fiancée's office. Peppa looked up from her computer sharply and raised an eyebrow at the unusually excited genius. Smart is an understatement. Back up and start from the beginning, honey, Peppa said, fond exasperation leaching into her tone. Tony took a seat on the opposite side of her desk and threw down a few pieces of paper. Peter, the twins' friend? Tony said, smart is an understatement. The kid's a genius. He just hasn't been tested for it. Tony, did you hack something you shouldn't have? Peppa said, and Tony just shrugged. You'd think a science school would have better security, Tony said flippantly. He then pointed to the papers with wide eyes. Pep, he just finished freshman year, but he was administered to do juniors class exams. Look at his marks, 100% across the board. This kid needs to be in college with a brain like this. Tony, maybe he enjoys being in high school with his kids his own age, Peppa said, and Tony made a noise in his throat. Most people enjoy being surrounded by people their own age. But Peppa, Tony whined, and the woman just shook her head. Tony slumped back in his seat for a moment before sitting up with a huge grin. Peppa raised an eyebrow at him as Tony started nodding. Pep, can I hire him as an intern? Do we do that? Yes, we have interns in all our departments, but they are all college students, Peppa said. She noticed Tony's face fall, so she sighed. Let me discuss things with legal. They will be able to tell me if they could any problems hiring a teenager. You are a star, Miss Potts, Tony said. Peppa rolled her eyes fondly as Tony jumped to his feet and walked out of her office. Peppa picked up her phone and asked the head of legal to come to her office so they could talk. While this was happening, Peter and the twins were diligently working on their Lego construction. This is quite enjoyable, Pietro commented. The group were halfway through building the tower when Wanda heard Peter's stomach rumbling. We should order some lunch, Wanda said. She looked at Peter with a kind smile. What would you like? Oh, I'll be all right. Peter tried to downplay his hunger, but Wanda saw straight through him. When she glared at him, he sighed. I could go pizza, I guess. Friday, could you place an order for pizza, please? Just get a variety, Wanda said to the AI. What we don't eat, Sam and Captain Rogers will eat. Can I use the bathroom? Peter asked, forcing his body to remain still. He knew the way to the bathroom, but that would give him away. So no matter how awkward and painful it was, he remained still. Sure, it's down the hall, 3rd floor on the right, Pietro said as he put a few pieces of the tower together. Peter nodded and jumped to his feet. He made his way slowly down the hall and into the bathroom. After he locked the door, Peter let out a deep sigh. Come on, Parker, pull yourself together. His tattoo warmed against his collarbone, and Peter smiled softly. After finishing his business and washing his face, Peter stepped out of the hallway into the hallway. He took 2 steps before coming face to face with Natasha Romanoff. The Russian spy looked him up and down, and to anyone not familiar with Natasha, the look would be terrifying. Peter, however, knew better that Natasha was simply intrigued by his presence. So you are the new friend, Natasha commented dryly. Yes, ma'am, Peter replied, maintaining eye contact with the woman. Nat raised an eyebrow at him, and a small smile crossed her face. Peter had known that she would approve of his bravery in maintaining eye contact. I'm Peter. It's lovely to meet you. We'll see, Natasha replied slyly before slipping past Peter and walking into one of the bedrooms. Peter let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding before walking back to where Wanda and Pietro were still building the Lego. Did you find it all right? Pietro asked as he looked up with a smile. Peter nodded and sat back down beside Wanda. This is so enjoyable. 40 minutes later, their pizza arrived and Pietro went down to retrieve it from the lobby. While he was gone, Wanda wrapped an arm around Peter's shoulder in a hug. What's this for? Peter asked as he cuddled into Wanda's side. Wanda pressed a kiss to his temple before answering. I am just happy. Her accent had gotten thicker with the emotion, and Peter squeezed her gently. We are safe, and for Pietro and I, that is a very new concept. Peter pressed a kiss of his own to Wanda's cheek as Pietro returned with a pile of pizzas. The older team placed the pizza down and went into the kitchen to grab plates before joining his sister and the boy they both saw as a brother. Midway through their lunch, the elevator doors opened and Sam and Steve walked into the room. The 2 men looked at the teens with interest, and Steve raised an eyebrow as he noticed Peter. Hi, Pietro, Wanda, Steve said as he approached the trio. And who is this? This is Peter, our friend, Wanda said. Peter stuck out a hand, first to Sam and then to Steve, and they both shook firmly. Welcome, Peter, Steve commented before looking down at his hand. Quite a grip you have there. Thank you, sir, Peter replied. He hated feeling so out of his depth. He knew these people. Hell, he even loved these people. Yes, even Cap, despite what he had done to Tony. Knowing they didn't know him was slowly killing him. Peter noticed Sam looking at him with a raised brow, and Peter quickly schooled his features. Welcome to the madhouse, kid, Sam said after a moment, and Peter smiled at Sam. Well, we'll get out of your hair, Steve said with a wide, welcoming smile. Peter, make yourself at home. If you need anything, I'm sure Friday would be happy to help you out. The adults left the room, and Peter let out a breath he hadn't known he had been holding. Pietro looked at him with a raised eyebrow and frowned. Are you all right? The older teen asked, and Peter nodded. Yeah, it's just weird seeing Captain America in the flesh. I'm so used to the PSAs. I guess I was expecting him to be just as irritating as those, Peter said, attempting to deflect any questions about his behaviour. What are PSAs? Wanda asked with a frown, and Peter grinned. Miss Friday, could you please find and play the Rappin' with Cap videos, please? Peter asked the AI with a smug on his face. The AI did as requested, and soon the twins were cackling loudly from their spots on the couches. Does Steve know about this? Well, Pietro asked between giggles. Does Steve know about what? Natasha asked as she walked into the room. She looked at the video that was playing and smirked. The three teens watched as the woman pulled out a phone and typed something into it. She joined them on the lounge, and within a few minutes the elevator doors were opening, and Tony, Steve, Sam and Rhodey were all emerging. Tony looked at the screen and promptly burst out laughing. Oh dear Lord, Steve groaned as his face flushed bright red. He turned to the cackling teenagers and sighed. Don't tell me they still show these. Fine, I'll keep my mouth shut, Peter sassed, and Tony let out a bark of laughter. Peter's heart clenched again, but he found himself relaxing slightly when Tony shot him a genuine smile. Twins? We are keeping this one, Tony said, and Peter smiled. Tony then turned to Peter and thrust a tablet into his hands. Solve this. The Avengers looked at one another in confusion as Peter looked at the tablet. The teen looked between the device and Tony for a second before returning his gaze to the problem on the screen. Within seconds he had solved it and was handing the tablet back. You didn't carry the free or reverse the negative, Peter said, blushing as Tony began to grin widely. The grin was his actual one, the manic one Peter had grown used to while when they were allowed to blow something up in the lab. You're hired, Tony said, and Peter stared at him. You're my new intern. You start Monday. Tony turned on his heel and breezed out of the room, leaving Peter staring after him with wide eyes and a gaping mouth. The Avengers all smirked at Peter's look, and Wanda squeezed his arm gently. What just happened? Peter asked the room, and Sam let out a burst of laughter. I think you just impressed Tony Stark, Steve commented, and Peter continued to gape like a fish at the space where Tony had been standing. This was not in the plans at all. Why do I tolerate that man? Pepper's voice drew Peter out of his thoughts. The woman approached him and rested a hand on his shoulder. I'm sorry for Tony's behaviour. He wasn't meant to spring that on you. What's going on, Miss Potts? Peter asked, and Pepper gave the teen a gentle smile. Tony approached me this morning asking if he could hire you as an intern, Pepper explained. I told him to give me time to contact legal, and I had just gotten off the phone with them working out logistics when Friday told me what he was planning on doing. But why me? Peter asked, and Wanda cooed. Because you are insanely intelligent, Pepper said, and Peter frowned. How does he know that? Peter asked, and Pepper sighed. Let me guess. Something illegal and unbecoming of a successful billionaire scientist. I like you, Pepper said with a smirk. You'll keep him on his toes. Here. Pepper handed Peter a thick envelope with Stark Industries logo and seal on it. Take that home to your guardians and read it over it. It's a basic contract detailing your position, SI policies and expectations and pay structure, Pepper explained, and Peter stared at her with an open mouth. Paid? Peter whispered, looking down at the envelope in his hands. I'd get paid? Of course, Pepper replied. All our interns are paid for their work. Given your age and current school level, you will be on a lower pay rate to some of the others, but you will be paid. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a billionaire to reprimand. I can't wait to see what you'll do. Peppa left the room, and once the elevator doors closed, Wanda wrapped Peter in a tight hug. Congratulations, little one, Wanda said as she pulled away and Pietro took her place. Peter hugged the twins and smiled, but inside he was panicking. He didn't know how he was going to cope being so close to Tony without any previous familiarity. Logically, he knew they could develop that relationship again, but Peter was scared. Looks like we'll be seeing a fair bit of you, Steve said, and Peter nodded. The Avengers said their goodbyes, leaving Peter alone with the twins once more. Come on, Selimic, Pietro said, pulling Peter over to the lounge and back to the coffee table. We have almost finished the tower. Peter allowed himself to be drawn back into the construction of the tower with the twins. Unbeknownst to them, the old adult Avengers were watching their every move. So, that's their new friend, Sam said as he indicated to Peter with his head. He's hiding something, Natasha said bluntly, and Steve's head snapped to her. Natasha shrugged but kept her gaze firmly on the teens. He is. Don't you think he's probably just excited or intimidated about being here in the tower? Steve said, but Nat shook her head. There's something about him, Natasha said. When she had run into the boy in the hallway, Nat had seen a quick flash of emotions that crossed his face. He was quick to shut them down, but she was well trained. She had seen the anger, pain, the fear, and then the loss that crossed across the kid's eyes when he looked at her. He had no idea why he had felt that, but Natasha didn't like loose ends. Come on, Nat, don't you think you're being a bit paranoid? Sam teased fondly, but Nat shook her head once more. Better paranoid than dead, Nat replied before finally turning her gaze to Sam. How goes your hunt? No leads so far, Sam said, shooting a look at a dejected Steve. Trail went cold, no pun intended, in London. You're doing your best, Sam. I know that, Steve replied comfortingly. Sam nodded, but was still unconvinced. Since the shield dump, there isn't much I can do to help. Maybe Tony could find something with his satellites, Nat offered, and Steve frowned. Steve, you should tell him. Aren't you the one preaching that we are a team? I'll ask, Steve said, unconvincingly. Nat frowned, but her attention was drawn back to where the teens were triumphantly exclaiming over finishing their Lego build. There were so many things happening around her, but for now, Nat knew where to focus her attention. Peter Parker was hiding something, and if he was going to spend time around the Avengers, her boys, she needed to know exactly what he was hiding. End of chapter 12. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed this. Welcome back to my channel. Nat's on the prowl, the twins and Peter being adorable, and Tony, of course, being over-enthusiastic. Again, I just want to give Peter a hug. He is surrounded by everybody he loves, but they don't remember that he loves them. It's horrible. Anyway, remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified for whenever I upload a new video. And yeah, have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I'll see you in chapter 13. Bye!